In this last video on the language class series, we're talking about the JavaScript that went into our contact us form. So if a user clicks into the name field right here, the value is set to an empty string, and if they click away, then it comes back. And same thing with the message. If they click in there, we set the value to an empty string, and then if they click away, we set it back to the default value. So what we're checking for here is if when they click into the name field, if the value here is set to the default value, then we're going to set it to an empty string. And when they click away, if the value is set to an empty string, then we're going to put back the default value. But if they put a name in here and then we click away, well, that value is not set to an empty string or the default value, so we're going to leave the name there. And the same thing with the message. When they go away, which is the fade event, it's not set to an empty string and it's not the default value, so we leave the message there. Some other JavaScript that's going on here is when they click the submit button, so we're going to do some client-side validation before that submit event can return true and the form can be submitted. And lastly, we have when they change the select here to French, we're doing some Ajax here, which is translating everything on the page. And every time this is done, another Ajax event fires, and then we reload the contents of the page. So let's look at how that happened. So remember, inside our view header here, we included jQuery right here on line 15, and if we go down to line 18, you'll see I have my main.js file. Okay, so we can take a look at the main.js file. And we have all of our JavaScript wrapped inside the document ready function. So we just wait for our DOM to be totally loaded before we perform any actions. Inside my document ready function here, the first thing I'm doing is I'm declaring my global namespace variable. So I'm naming that window.com_domain, and that is being set to itself, but in the event that itself doesn't exist, then it's being set to an empty object. Underneath that I have my key script variables, and default name value, that is set to, we're grabbing the value from the sender name input field. So in the beginning that is set to please enter your name. And then we're doing the same thing with the text area, sender message.val, that is grabbing this default value right here, please enter your message. And we're storing that in these two local variables. After that, we are just selecting the validation errors div, and then we're caching that inside a local variable called $validation errors, because this was used in several different places in our script. We're just caching this and storing it in a local variable, and that's just going to help our script run a bit faster. And this $sign in front of it is just sort of a common way to cache a jQuery variable. It just gives other programmers a heads up that this is that we've cached a jQuery selector. So underneath that we have our behavior to improve user experience. So like I said before, if somebody focuses in, so if they click into one of the inputs, and if that value was set to the default name value, then we set it to an empty string here. And when they leave that one, when they click out, if the value was set to an empty string and they didn't put in their name, then we're going to put that default name value back there, which is please enter your name. And the same thing is going on with the text area here. I'm not going to explain this because it's exactly the same. So if we move down here, we'll see the JavaScript for our select box. And the first thing we're doing is we're selecting our select box. So and the way we're selecting it is we're using jQuery's attribute selectors. So you can see I have my select element right here, and I have name is equal to language. Now because we only have one select on the page, I could have just done this and just removed it all, but it's very possible in the future we have more select boxes on here, and if we left it like this it would select all of them. So I'm going to leave my attribute selector there. And we are selecting that, and we're looking for the change function. So when somebody changes it, then we are going to execute this function. So first thing I'm doing is in my window.com domain, in my global namespace variable, we are attaching on a language property, and we're setting that to the value of the select box. So if they change to French, then we're going to have French right here, and we're going to store that in our language property. The next thing I want to talk about is the target URL. So when we're doing our AJAX request, we are going to post this to a certain URL. And I ran into a little bit of a problem here, and I tried to think of a good way to solve it. And I came up with this. And the problem relates to the way CodeIgniter serves up URLs. So we know that our contact form is accessible here at /project/ci2/mypages. So they could be on this URL looking at our contact form, but they could also be just CI2, and because this is the default controller, they could also be here. So I wanted a way to dynamically grab the URL and be able to post it to the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back here, and in a comment here you'll see that if we posted here and then we went to our default controller, which is my pages, and then we go to the method that we're posting to, which is get language data, and let's just post this in here. So if we submitted to right here, that would work just fine. However, they might also be at this page, which is we remove this stuff right here. So they're at CI2, and then if we just tack on get language data, well, this isn't going to work because it doesn't have my pages right here. So I wanted to do a check to see whether my pages was in there or not. Now I could have just hard-coded a URL in here, like for example this URL. I could have just hard-coded that into the URL, but that wouldn't make this code very portable. So if in the future it's not on localhost, it's on abc.com, or we sort of we make some other changes to our URL, I just wanted to make it as portable as possible. So what I was able to come up with was we're using here window.location.pathname. So that is going to get basically whatever is up here in the URL. So whether that's CI2 or CI2/mypages, it's going to grab all of that without the trailing slash, I believe. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just checking if in that path name if my pages is in there. And if the way we check that is we have the string right here and then .index of, pass it my pages, and if that's greater than -1, then we know that my pages was in the URL. So what I'm going to return for the target URL is window.location.pathname and then concatenate on get language data, because I know that my pages is already in that path name. And if this wasn't the case, if there was no my pages there, then I know what their URL was like this, okay, /ci2. And in that case, what I'm going to return to target URL is the path name and concatenate on my pages /get language data. And I did a bit of testing with this, and it was working just fine. So that's as dynamic as a solution as I was able to come up with so far. So we can go down to our jQuery.ajax invocation right here, and we have the type set to post. The data type is JSON, so what this is referring to is what kind of response are you expecting back from the server. Are you going to get JSON back as a response? Are you going to get XML or HTML? We're going to put that right here, and in this case we're getting JSON back, and we have our target URL right there. And data is the name value pairs that we're passing to the method that we're submitting to. So here we just have a language, and then the value of that is this .value. So in that select box it's either going to be English or French, and we're just grabbing that, and then we're sending that as the value, and language is the name. And if that AJAX request is successful, then we're going to do this callback function. So we do success, and then we put our callback function after that. Before we talk about that, let's just go over to the controller that this is being submitted to and see what's going on there. So I'll go to my pages here, and we have our method right here, get language data. This is where it's being submitted to. So the first thing I'm doing is we have this input post language. So we just posted to this method right here. Now whatever we posted, we're going to store the language inside this user language variable. And then we're loading in our language class again. So contact form underscore and the language, and then the language, we looked at this already. And after that, we're setting up our data array. So basically what we're doing here is we're preparing all of the JSON data, and we're going to use JSON encode function on this associative array right here. And what this function is going to do is it's going to take the associative array and it's going to convert it to well-formed JSON, and then we're going to echo the well-formed JSON, and that is going to give our JSON response to our AJAX function that called it. So inside here we have title, name, message, submit, name, value, and we can see all of these inside our language file right here. So contact form English. So all the information that we need in our JSON object, we're just grabbing that and we're putting it in our associative array, and then just doing JSON encode on it, and then responding with JSON. So if we go back to our main.js file here, you'll see that if it was successful, now we can do all of our stuff about translating the page, and that's what's going on right here. So the H1, we're changing the text of that. The table data cell with name, we're changing that to name, and we can see that right here. So this is inside a table data cell. Same with this one, and we're updating those. And then our input with the type of submit. So this is our submit button, and we're changing the value to our new submit value. So submit is going to become soumettre in French. And the next thing, our sender name, we're just updating the values here. So no matter what you want to update, you just do that inside your callback function right there. And the last thing I'm doing is I'm updating our default value. So remember at the top here, when we first loaded the page, for example, maybe it was English, and this was something like, please enter your name. Okay, I made a mess there, but yeah, originally that was please enter your name. So we stored that in default name value, but once they've changed everything to French and they've let us know that they speak French, well, we're going to update this default name value, and that's what I did at the bottom of the callback function right here. Just updating those default name values to something that's French. The last thing I want to talk about is the validation we're doing when the user clicks on the submit button, and that's happening right here. So what we're doing is we're grabbing the submit button here, and when they click on that, we're going to run this function. And by default, when someone clicks on it, it's going to be sent an event, and you can just put this in here. I think it will be passed in anyways, even if you don't put that there, and then you can reference that inside your function. You can see I used here event.preventDefault. So let's see what happens here when they click on the submit button. The first thing we're doing is user language is set to, we're grabbing this global variable right here, window.com domain the language, and we're just storing that in a local variable right here. Actually, I don't think this was necessary because, like I said, this was global. This is a global property, so we could grab it from anywhere. But anyways, let's keep going here. So if the sender name value was set to an empty string, or the value of their name was set to the default value, well, that's not acceptable. They didn't put their name in there. So if it was English, then we're going to give them this error message, sorry, you must input your name. And here you'll see I'm doing $validation errors.html, and that relates to the top right here. You'll see that we grabbed our validation errors div right here, and then we cached it in this local variable. So this is, we go to our view right here. You'll remember at the bottom we had this div validation errors. So basically we're just grabbing this div right now, and we're going to put the error message in it now. So let's go back down here, and we're grabbing that and we're setting the inner HTML to sorry, you must input your name. But if it wasn't English, then we know it's French, and then we just pass in the HTML and put the French message in there. The last thing we're doing is event.preventDefault, and I think this is basically the same as doing return false here. So on your JavaScript, in your JavaScript functions, for example, like a submit button, if on the event you put return false at the end, that is going to prevent the form from being submitted. But we can do it the jQuery way right here, which is event.preventDefault. And if we go down here, we have the validation for the message, and basically this is exactly the same, except for here we're checking that the message that they're sending is at least 10 characters. So if the value of that, and then we grab the length, if that's less than 10 characters, then we're not going to accept it, and then we're going to give them their error messages based on what language is said here. Okay. And finally, we can go down to sender message right here, and I believe it's the same deal here. Yeah, if that's set to the default message, well, we're not going to let them set the default message, which was like, please enter your message, and we're going to give them an error message of please write your message.